Hello! I've just read chapter 8 of The Last of the Jedi Underworlds. I unintentionally had a day break from the book. But anyway, on to the summary. So, you got Trevor, he's seen Ferris's speeder, of course, that he stole. And he's just thinking, what now or what next? Because he was wondering whether he was having the time of his life being with Ferris, or was just absolutely crazy for staying with him because he had been through atmospheric storms, dangled off buildings, now was in an stolen an Imperial speeder, and every time he had the chance to run off, he didn't, and he just didn't know why he was staying and how the galaxy was just so big when you had nowhere to go. Anyway, Ferris then tells him that Maloran believes that there is a Jedi alive, and that he knows somewhere where they can go to get information. And Ferris says, "But do you ever stop? I would like some food and some sleep." Ferris says that no sleep, not yet, but I can get you some food where we're going. And so they go off to Dexter Jettster's diner from episode 2, Attack of the Clones. It's the one with it's the same one that tells Obi-Wan where the Camino Saber Darts comes from. I'm fairly sure it says, "Well, what do you know?" But Ferris stands there and he just looks at the now destroyed diner, and a woman in a red robe walks past and says that she's seen the expression on Ferris's face with so many people, and asks if she wanted a burger from Dexter. And we also learn that while Ferris didn't specifically, before he meets the woman, we learn that Ferris, though he didn't specifically know Dexter himself, only ever met him a few times, Obi-Wan had told him to go to Dexter if he ever needed information. And to tell him that Obi-Wan had sent him. So Ferris explains that they were the best in the galaxy, and asks what happened, and the woman says to him that he was accused of helping enemies of the Empire, and so his diner was destroyed. And Ferris just says, "Oh, of course." And as someone's walking by, and the woman says, "Oh, be careful what you say." And so Ferris asks what happened to Dexter, and she goes on to say that there's rumours, and there's always rumours on Coruscant, and that some say he's dead, some say he was arrested, and some say that he's a part of the Erased. And that's the second time it's been mentioned in the book. I don't remember the first time it's mentioned. I know it was mentioned, but with it even being capitalised. For Ferris, again, this is the second time Ferris has heard it, and so he asks, "What's the Erased?" And the woman says that once shortly after the Emperor took over, there was an kind of order he put out. What was the name of it? The woman says that you don't know, and the woman tells him that and Ferris says that he left Coruscant a long time ago, and the woman says, "If you're back here now, you should know about them." And she explains that the Enemy Eradication Order of Coruscant was issued shortly after Palpatine took over as Emperor, and that it was pretty much was to keep an eye and have surveillance on people of the Republic. I suppose it was Republic sympathisers to me. I've gone way too far back. She says it was specifically designed to target those who had been active in the Republic, and she explains that at first it was just surveillance and had to have weekly meetings with Imperial officers, but then those meetings, but then they were forbidden to travel, and that eventually that surveillance led to arrest to death or a living death, and so some engineers are their own disappearances, and that they help each other now. You can get rid of your name and ID docs and any record of your existence and disappear. And she says that rumours say that they're far below in the sub-levels, and Ferrosix says, well, what happened to Dexter? And she says that again, rumours, there's always rumours and correspondence. Some say that he was arrested, some say he's dead, and some say he travels the galaxy like he used to. And she says to Ferris that if he does go down below, to never visit the Orange District at near sunset. Ferris says, well, thank you for the advice. And so Ferris and Trevor make their way to the Orange District, and we learn it's not its official name, but the residents of the people in that district used to remove the lights that the Senate would set up there and replace them with orange lights. And eventually the Senate just gave up, so it's nicknamed the Orange District, and it's very crowded. And Ferris is saying it's important, and Trevor says, this is a perfect hiding spot. Do you know, it would probably take thousands of years for the Imperials to search every house in every home. When Ferris explains to him that they need to make sure they don't advertise their presence. They need to make sure they don't advertise that there's strangers down here, but also make sure they don't seem too at home either. And there's always people here to sell information, and so a cafe is probably the best place for them to go. And he starts looking around for a cafe. Trevor tries to get Ferris's attention and points over to a dark alley, and there's a red light and presumably a sign, because Ferris says the sunset. Not Ferris, Trevor says sunset, and I assume that's the name of the club there. And so Ferris and Trevor go over. Ferris says that he'll go in and for Trevor to wait out there. Trevor says, no, I'll go and get some stuff like data pads and something, and I can sneak in, pretend to sell stuff. Ferris just goes, you mean steal? And Trevor just goes, no need to be precise, but no one ever suspects a street boy. And Ferris says, no, I'll go in. I know how to deal with this. There are always people with information in cantinas. They will, if you know where to look and how to manage it. And so he opens the door, and and just as he opens it, a whippet grabs him and throws him out. And he says that this is a private club and to go back to where they came from, and Trevor goes, "Hey, now hold on a moment, Two-Face." And Ferris goes, "I wouldn't call him that if I were you. They really don't like that name." But before he can even finish it, the whippet just throws Trevor onto Ferris. And Ferris lets out a gasp of air. And that's when the whippet calls for others to come and take the two of them, and that they have some trash to collect. And earlier we also saw there were compact cubes of garbage across the streets, and even though they've been sanitised, there was still a bit of a foul smell. And Chevy just went, I think I've lost my appetite. But anyway, back to this scene. That's when loads of people start coming out, and Ferris says, "Look, I'm just here for information." And the Slythemonger says, what makes you think we have information? And what makes you think we have information to give? And Ferris goes, no, not give, sell. And that's when the Slife goes, or one of them goes, he's got credit! Kill him! And they all start trying to go after Ferris. He thought he can maybe take on the Whippet and the Slife but then there's about 10 other people there now, and he knows they can't manage, and he doesn't want to use his lightsaber because that would draw too much attention, and he knows that would draw Malorum's attention, and it wouldn't only endanger himself, it would endanger Fytor, which he knows Malorum believes is alive. And then he sees Trevor making a quick escape. Trevor has the greatest home sense of self-preservation that he's ever seen. And he draws, and a woman says, "Look at the little Von Pratt one," and Ferris leaps and draws his blaster, and leaps onto a burnt-out speeder that Ferris ducked under, and says that they'll have to get through him first. And everyone starts drawing their weapons, their blasters, vibro shivs, vibro blades, Imperial Force pike. One of them has an Imperial Force pike, and a boffin goes, "Gladly!" And that's when a laugh is heard from inside the club, and it's Dexter Jetster, and he says to not hurt the chums, and that's, he may know one of them, and that's where we end this chapter. I think this was quite a nice. Again, I don't quite know what to say about this chapter, because I enjoyed it, but I don't really know quite where to start and talk, because again, this is very much a progression chapter where there's not a whole lot to talk about, but it does progress the story. I think maybe next chapter I'll have a bit more to talk about, but it has more good bits of humour. I'm going to be interested to see whether Dexter started the Erased or not. I'm interested to see just how much relevance he has in the Erased, because he definitely seems to be from what's been gathered, he seems more like a leading figure. The Orange District, I think, is quite interesting. And hopefully we get to see a little bit more of it. I didn't quite gather that Malorum was aware. I knew Malorum was aware of the Jedi, otherwise he wouldn't have set up his trap. But it does make me wonder, how did he know about Fytor? Because I didn't gather that he knew specifically about Fytor. I only gathered that he knew that there may be some Jedi, but not specifically Fytor. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe it just didn't click with me when I read it initially. But yeah. Anyway, I enjoyed the chapter. I'm going to be curious as to whether that woman, or the woman in the red robe that explains about what happened to Dexter and the Orange District and its diner, etc., to Ferris. I'm going to be curious to see if she has anything, if she comes back a little bit later. Because she, to me, seems a little bit suspicious. Although it also seemed, because the way the book was making it framed, she seemed very cautious and critical of Ferris, but was also trying to measure out whether she could trust him or not. And so that doesn't necessarily mean she wants to have Ferris go down and send a message for her, you know. Maybe she is an Imperial spy, and wanting to try and use Ferris to see if she can specifically find where the Erased is. That doesn't sound quite right though. I don't know why they wouldn't just go down there, the Empire. But anyway, I'm going to be interested to see if she pops up again, because I think the way they're talking about it, yeah, she definitely should, but you never know. I'm also going to be interested to see what relevance Dexter has. I assume Ferris wants to talk to him about where Fytor is. So, yeah. maybe they'll even use the arrays to wipe Ferris and Trevor's identities, but you never know. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello everyone. I have just read Chapter 9 of The Last of the Jedi, Underworld. So yeah, we pick up where we last left off. Dexter beckons Trevor and Ferris in with three of his four hands, and the arrays are all a bit disappointed and stuff. And Dexter, Ferris and Trevor go sit down, and Dexter says, "So you must be Ferris Solon. I remember when Siri used to bring you in to me," and he asks who Trevor is, and Trevor says, "Trevor Flume." And they have a bit of a conversation. Ferris tells him that Obi-Wan's alive and he sends his regards, and Dexter says to Ferris that tell Obi-Wan that he's still alive and well, and tell him that he's still alive and that Dexter is still his friend. And Ferris says, "It's good to see. He'll be glad to hear that you're well." And Dexter says, "Well, not really, but surviving." I'm gonna actually have to look through their conversation because I kind of forgot it. And Dexter also asks where Obi-Wan is, and Ferris says that he can't tell him that. And Ferris says that you are one of the erased, and Dexter explains says that he's erased, he is part of it, and he says that Obi-Wan has spoke too soon and he doubts he has help to give him. But he also says Ferris, if he's come to be erased, he knows who to put him into contact with, and you can give him a temporary place to stay, but the erased have to keep on moving, and do whatever to survive, whatever, with no judgments at all. Whatever you do to survive, you do. And Ferris notices that everyone's looking at him at the bar, even the whippet who's cleaning the counter. And Dexter reassures him that to not worry about them. They're just looking out for him in case he tries to make an attack with anything. And when Trevor asks who they are, and Dexter also reassures him that if he says they're all right, then they'll be welcome. And Trevor asks who they are, and Dexter goes on to explain that they were mixed lots and anyone the Empire was harassing, and some of them are heroes and villains, journalists, former Republic officers, and maybe some criminals mixed in. And Ferris looks over to the Strifemonger and goes, "I noticed that." And Dexter knows immediately who he's talking of and says, "Ah, you're speaking of Keats." And Trevor goes, "Yeah, the one who couldn't wait to run us through with a vibro shiv." And Dexter says, he's growled his words on his jump, and explains that he wasn't a criminal in the old days, and was actually a journalist who was the first to question Palpatine's power. And Ferris just goes, "Keats? Really? What Keats? Really?" And he read some of Freely's commentaries during the war, and Dexter says the very same, and we get a bit of an introduction to quite a lot of them. There's a Bothan there who is called Orion, who was one of the best spies the Republic ever had, a human female with silver hair that spiked into horns, who is Ryla Tulum, a senator from Angry Dawn, and she can't go back to her homeworld because she's got a death mark on her head. And there's a Civiv Rennie, and he was a Senate aide, and a tall humanoid wasn't a tall humanoid. Who we later learn is called Hume. Was an officer in the army of the Republic, but not a clone. And Dexter says not worry about the brothers, who are, I'm fairly sure, are later referred to as something. Oh, no, I can't remember it. So I'll tell you when I came across the name. And he says not ask about the brothers because none of them know where they are, which does make me a bit where they came from, but it does make me a bit suspicious as to whether they're Imperial spies. And Ferris just looks around in astonishment and excitement and just says, here it is. This is where rebellions start in places like this. And Dex just says, no, they're a long way from rebellion, and that they're just trying to survive. And that Coruscant used to be a decent place to live, but things have changed, and even an ordinary person from Coruscant that are just trying to get by are having a hard time. And bribe and intimidation are just normal in life now. And Ferris just says to him that he and Trevor were just at the Jedi Temple, and Dex says, yes, I know, there's rumours going around that it's a Jedi prison, and Ferris says, that's just propaganda that they've been doing, and Dex goes, as I suspected as much, that's why I told the Jedi who came through here not to go there. And Ferris goes, did you get the Jedi's name? And Dex says he didn't. And Ferris starts saying one with a Jedi female with a facial marking on her forehead, and Dexter goes, yes, that's the one. And he says that he told her not to go to the temple, and that she heard he was a friend of the Jedi, and she sought him out, and that was before he was part of the Erased. And he couldn't give her much, and he was surprised that any Jedi was alive at all. But and he knows that she went down below into the deepest sub-levels. Ferris asks if he knows where she is, and Dexter says that he doesn't know, but he recently got a message from her with her saying that if he ever needed her, he should look for solace. And Ferris goes, solace? And Dexter says that's the word he's been hearing a lot more lately. And Trevor asks where it is, and Dex says they don't know, and he doesn't know because he hasn't needed her yet. And we also later learn that solace is pretty much an impossible place to find, yet people still somehow find their way to it. Ferris looks around and says that there's something he should know, and that the Empire is intending to wipe out the Erased, and that they're all becoming too bothersome, and they want to control Coruscant all the way down to its crust. And Dex says that won't be easy even for the Empire, and Ferris tells him that Darth Vader's made it its personal mission, and Dex says, Darth Vader, that's another story. And he says to Ferris that he'll need a guide if he's going to go down below into the sub-levels. And Ferris asks, do you have someone in mind? And Dexter just goes, maybe. But first, a small party with the gang, and everyone comes over and sits over with Dex, and they all start discussing. And they all start saying that they're going to need to move deeper down. And that one of them says that they're going to need to move. And also, yeah, there's turbines, and there's turbines and steam going on, which makes it hard to overhear people, because there are some people who are quite don't quite like being overheard. And Ferris and Dex introduces Ferris and Trevor to the 7 people of the Erased that are sitting there, and Dex says that. Tells him that the Empire is planning to eradicate them, and that they all knew it would happen at some point, but it's a bit sooner than they wanted it to. And one of them, and the Severity, whatever it was, says that they're not prepared for it, and Dexter introduces him as Curran Caladian to Ferris, and Ferris says that he knew a Tayo Caladian, and that he had died during the Senate massacre prior to the Clone Wars, and he had met Tayo quite a few times, and Kaladin says, and Curran says that yes, Tayo was his cousin, and that they were Senate aides together. And we learn that Ferris saved Palpatine's life during the massacre, and Dexter makes a joke and says, if you just move slightly bit to the left, maybe we'd all be in a better shape. And Ferris acknowledges the joke with a slight smile, but he doubts he actually did anything to save Palpatine and believes that Palpatine was probably in control of it all, or shaped, or had foreseen the attack and just put it into his favour. And Dex says, back to the subject at hand, they need some decisions to make, they should warn the others and try to help if they can, and offer a place for the Erased to go if they need it, and they need to leave the Orange District. And the former Republic officer called Hume says that they need to go deeper, and Ryataloon agrees, and the Bothan Orion says that their strength lies in their bonds, and they should find a place where they'll all be safe, not just for them, but any Erased who wish to join them. The brothers just sit and nod at each other, and Dux reveals their name to be Gillian Spence. And Dux goes, now, what about Solace? And this is where Ryataloon explains how difficult Solace is to find. I've heard rumours about it. A kind of refuge, they say. Secret, safe, impossible to find, yet many find their way there. I say we find it, Dexter said. Ferris has got the skills to protect us on the journey. Me? Ferris thought. Since when did I volunteer? And Keats really just looks around at the battered cafe and canteen or whatever it is, and just says, and leave this, in a joking way. And Ferris goes, wait a second, I thought I was getting a guide, not leading a group. And he looks at Dexter, and Dexter's eyes are just twinkling, and Ferris just thinks, oh well, it's been outmanoeuvred, and he didn't mind doing Dexter a favour. He would have done it. It says he'd do it for Obi-Wan, and also help the find lost Jedi. And he notices Trevor doesn't mind. He's smiling, and he thinks that, yeah, for Trevor, these are his kind of people. They probably remind him of the black marketers back on Belasa. And Dexter says to take a vote, and everyone slowly raises their weapons, and all the 7 raised agree to go. And Dex says that he'll be staying here, and he's not as mobile as he used to, and he'll also try to warn us to stay lower than normal, and he'll wait to hear from them. As everyone goes, Ferris just says to Dex, don't think I didn't notice how you trapped me into this, he said. Where's your spirit of adventure, young Olin? Dexter chortled and slapped him on the back, sending him shooting forwards. He saved himself from crashing into a column just in time. And then Ferris explains to him that he's been a long time since he was a Jedi, and that he's a little rusty. And Dexter says he would prefer to have a half-trained Jedi over a Stormtrooper battalion any day. And also says that he should just call him Dex, and he has a feeling that this will be the start of a longer relationship. And then Ferris goes into a fairly solitary corner in the canteen and speaks with Obi-Wan over a hologram with a coded signal they made sure to make for each other. And Obi-Wan says, you should only call me in emergencies, when Ferris gives him a pleasantry. And Ferris just goes, okay, then I guess this isn't an emergency. I guess you don't want to hear what I have to say then. Bye. And Obi-Wan just goes, hello, Ferris, how are you? And Ferris says to him that he explains that he overheard that Darth Vader doesn't have any interest in Police Master, and told Malorum and stops Malorum from investigating any further. And Obi-Wan goes, that's good. And Ferris tells him, no, it's not good, because Malorum's after Vader's position, and he will pursue it. And Obi-Wan asks if he knows what Malorum knows, and Ferris says that he didn't because the wall caved in, and Obi-Wan says that they have to find out, and that they must be alert for any questions surrounding the death of Padme Amidala as well, and asks if they can get back into the temple. Ferris just says that Trevor and him barely got out, and Obi-Wan says that Obi-Wan says to Ferris, you know I can't leave here, Ferris, and I don't want to put you and Trevor in danger. but Malorum has to be stopped. Varys says that it'll stop him for him. He doesn't know why, and he doesn't know how, but it will do it. And Obi-Wan says to him, "May the Force be with you." You know, I'm beginning to realise that it actually is with me, still. Of course it is, Varys. Obi-Wan's voice was warm now. It's penned on it. And that's how we end off the chapter. If you remember back in Dark Warning, I was constantly complaining about how much action there was, and this is definitely the complete opposite. Again, like last chapter, it was just a lot of moving the plot along. I wasn't expecting to see Obi-Wan in this book, because I thought he was only going to be holograms in some of the later books, but I was pleasantly surprised. I think we also learned that Dexter's kind of an unofficial leader in the arrays, and we also in last chapter learned that his diner was known all over Coruscant, all over Galactic City as it's called. But anyway, Dexter, I found that last moment with him almost slapping Ferris into a wall to be quite funny. I think I found the introduction between Ferris and Obi-Wan. I found Ferris's starting sentences to be quite funny. He was about to cut it off as a joke, and everyone just goes, "Hello, Ferris." Again, not really a whole lot to talk about, because it is just a lot of sitting around and talking and pretty much furthering the plot. And when I was reading it, I did go back to I think it was chapter 6. I did have a little peek back in there to see, yes, that's where the erase was mentioned. And Vader mentions that Malorum is saying to Malorum, "You are too focused on hunting Jedi, you're meant to be eliminating the erased." And we can't have resistors turning into heroes. So yeah, I did go back, and that's where the erase was mentioned. I knew it was mentioned before, and I assumed it was in that chapter, but I didn't find it until then, while I was reading this. Again, as I said, not really a whole lot to talk about, because again, it's just a lot of sitting around and forwarding the plot in conversation. I think it would be nice to see Dexter have at least one more conversation with Obi-Wan because of Ferris. I think that would be a nice thing to see. I kind of hope we get to see that. I don't think we will, but I hope we will. I'm going to be interested to see whether Gilly and Spence, the brothers, are actually Imperial spies, because they don't know what their history is, and that to me comes across as quite suspicious, especially when you know that there's spies everywhere on Coruscant and that you can't really trust anyone. And we know that Malorum has spies everywhere on Coruscant, and he even says that they've got spies everywhere on Coruscant, and even says later that they have spies everywhere on Coruscant. They have reports that aren't finished. Some are waiting for more information. So I'm a bit suspicious of Gilly and Spence. I'm going to be interested to see whether they turn out to be spies or not. We also have the spies in Ferris's group as well. I'm quite interested with that. I'm curious to see who the spy will be. I have a feeling, I doubt it will, but I get the feeling it might just be Garen Mullen, because I don't really think it would be Toma or Rayna. I really don't. Maybe Garen Mullen, or it may be someone. Maybe Malorum is referring to the 11 from the first book, and in that case, maybe it's. I don't think it's Amiatin. I do not for a second believe it's Amiatin, because Malorum threatened her son, and that was the last straw for her, the straw that broke the camel's back for her. And again, I don't think it's Vilasani. There was another one in there. I can't remember her name, but I think she had crisscrossing blaster holsters on her. I can't remember her name. I want to say Rona, but I don't think that's it. No, it hasn't. I'm fairly sure it began with her name began with an R. But anyway, maybe her. Okay, I don't know. I'm going to be interested to see where the spy bits will go. I think they've mentioned spies so much now. I think we're going to have a plot twist with a spy with a spy at some point. I'm going to be interested to see what Solace is. I think because it definitely seems like, because the way it's portrayed, it definitely seems like it might just be another group. But I think it would be an interesting twist if it's actually a person, because we've had the Erased, we've had the 11, and the furniture we've had a couple of other stuff as well. In Dark, I think the furniture we had another bit in Dark Warning, but I can't quite remember. And I think it would be nice to see if Solace is actually a person, not a group. But you never know, maybe it is just a group. Probably is going to wind up being a group. I think it would be a nice change if it is if Solace is a person, not a group. But yeah, again, I'm going to be interested to see what Solace is and what that's like. I'm going to be interested to see what that's like. What purpose Solace serves. So yeah. Anyway, that's my review for Chapter 9 of The Last of the Jedi Underworld. So then, thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello, I've just read Chapter 10 of The Last of the Jedi Underworld. I'm actually going to have to go back to... I've gone way too far. I'm going back to page 74, I'm meant to be on the 80 pages. Almost there. So we start the chapter off from Trevor's perspective, and we learn that Trevor feels quite at home with the Arrays, and that these do remind him of the friends he has back in the black market. And he thought that Shaw, Gillian, Spence, no one wants to ask what they did before they were erased, but that was fine with him. That he was used to people concealing their pasts, and they weren't too short of being heavily armed with makeshift weapons, and that they trusted more than any blaster. And Keats Freely was talkative, and the book says that guy could chew your ear off with facts about the Coruscant underlevels, how they always existed outside of the law, how security didn't penetrate this far down. Millions of inhabitants relied on their own defensive skills, or teams of vigilantes to protect neighbourhoods and individual apartment structures with their hundreds of inhabitants. And they start making their way down in a speeder. And we also learn that according to Keats, before the Clone Wars, the Senate did try to keep the lower levels in order, but after the Clone Wars, and they did try to help the lower levels, they set up medical clinics, etc. And sent droid teams down there for occasional repairs. But with the new greedy Senate, nobody cared now, and so millions of people down there had to travel in packs and keep arsenals just to protect themselves. And Trevor says that Trevor could have skipped the lecture and picked up the main point. Watch your back. And he notices that Ferris isn't too happy with leading the Erased. But they had travelled for hours until they were far away from the Galactic City and the Senate, and all Ferris could think about was searching for the Jedi he was searching for, because again, Dexter kind of he kind of outmaneuvered Trevor into making him leading the group to Solace, without Ferris really wanting to do so. I know there was something from last chapter I was meaning to mention here, because we didn't mention it, but I can't remember it. But anyway, but yeah, all Ferris can think about is finding Phytor Anna. And Ferris thinks that, yeah, he was a little bit obsessive, but he had never met anyone he felt he could depend upon like Ferris, and thought, yeah, it's worth sticking around. And although their plans were loose, they had to be, as it says, and they went down in one large speeder and collecting information along the way, and that there were so many rumours about Solace that they felt certain, yeah, they could find a way to Solace, and we are made clear that it is a place. And although some of the rumours did come across as quite extreme, and here are just some of the examples. Number 1, Solace was a place on the crust that had escaped the monolithic building boom on Coruscant. It had trees and lakes and was open to the sky far above with nothing on top of it. And if you believe that, Trevor thought, you believe in space angels. Number 2, Solace was built centuries ago on the crust, a wondrous place of palaces and towers where all were welcome, and all were cherished, and all were free. Right, and the Emperor is a humble guy looking out for everyone's well-being, and the galaxy's a blooming garden. The only rumour Trevor truly believed was the fact they already knew. Solace was hard to find. But they wind up staying in a hotel for a bit, for the night, and by her saloon just lies on a sleep couch and just says, we're not getting nowhere, and Keats really says you've got to ask a lot of questions before you get real answers. And he says that even though they may not see it, they have some pieces of the puzzle, and Ryo's just, we do. And he goes, there's one thing they keep hearing, and it's on the crust or below. And Ferris just says, that's true, that's the common thread, and Orion says, in a position while squatting, which is apparently his idea of a relaxing position, which Trevor finds, but he says that there is usually a bit of truth in even the most exaggerated of rumours. And Gillian and Spence agree by nodding, and Hume says that he said, and Hume just says, it's got to be a first time, Hume said, and Keats just says, even a broker, even a broken crow knows right twice a day, which crow knows such as the watches in Star Wars. And so they make the decision to go straight down to the cross, and Ferris agrees, and Keats asks if anyone's ever been that deep before, and Boyer just goes, "Are you kidding? I never made it out of Galactic City." Then again, I never shot a blaster before either, and Orion just checks his weapon and says, "Well, get ready. You may have plenty of opportunities to... plenty of opportunities soon." And once the lights comes, they immediately make their way down toward the crust. And Ferris is concentrating, trying to avoid crashing. And because there's also no space lanes down here. And we learn that once the level, Coruscant pretty much was built on top of it. Well, it's pretty much built on top of all the buildings. Once the current level got too crowded to bear, they built a new level, and so it was kind of like a time machine going back. As each level just got older and older and more ancient, and just again, you know what I mean. And once they get to the bottom, they land on the landing platform that's held up with timbers of steel and wood, and Trevor can very clearly see that it was improvised, and it seems to be that was the name of the game all the way down here. And we learn that it's all made from stone, and there's they're many floors, that they're hundreds of floors high, at the crust, and they were very much committed to being very grand and stuff. As there's carvings and balconies, intricate carvings. I mean, there's turrets and towers. The stone is cracked and crumbling, and they've all been patched up with scrap metal and wood. And the streets are narrow and winding, with alleys leading off from alleys in a confusing maze, and there was no official system there at all. And there was no power, no water, no light, no ventilation. That wasn't powered by private generators. And they walked down a narrow alleyway and a narrow arched walkway. They noticed that the stone beneath their feet is cracked and split, and there's fissures, and some of them are meters wide, so they have to jump or go around them. And Trevor is just in awe. He looks up and he just feels oppressed by just the fact that there's so many lives up there, right above him. Now there's millions of lives and millions of people and millions of hearts pumping. Keats says, you're uncharacteristically silent, and Trevor just goes, it's a bit overwhelming, and Keats goes, yeah, I suppose it is a bit oppressive. And that's when Trevor gets pushed over to the side by Keats, and he just goes, hey, what? Oh, but before that, we do get a little bit of information from Keats when Trevor asks who lives down here, and he just shrugs and says, immigrants from other worlds, those who come here hoping to do better, those who lost everything, those who had nowhere else to go, just creatures living, trying to live, and those who prey off them. And Trevor goes, and those looking for the wonderful world of solace. And Keats chuckles, and then he pushes Trevor onto the floor, and Trevor just goes, hey, what? And then he realises that he had pushed him out the way of a stun dart as a gang makes an attack. And everyone immediately starts attacking, and Ferris is able to scare the gang off with his lightsaber, with Hume and I think it's Orion by his side, Orion and Hume, and they do fire at him and curse him and saying that they'll kill Ferris, but eventually, once they're gone, Trevor tries to stand back up, and also Gillian Spencer trying to chase them down, the young gang, but Trevor tries to get back up, and he tries to roll to his feet, and his foot gets stuck in one of them, the fissures, whatever it's meant to be called, and he tries to pull it out, and he can't, and he peers down into the crack, and that's when he sees a tail grabbing him, and he tries to pull his leg out, and it just pulls him in further. It just pulls and gets tugs on harder, and that's when he tries to kick a lit, and Trevor starts calling out for Ferris, and that he looks down, and he sees a eye from the creature, and it pulls him down to his, and it pulls Trevor down further, down to his hips, and that's when he starts hitting the creature with his fist, and he then with his other hand he reaches for anything on his utility belt, and he reaches an alpha charge, but he fumbles but he kind of fumbles it, and while trying to set it up, and it falls down into the crack to whoever knows where, and it blows, and he gets a good look at the creature from the light coming from it, and that's when he hears something whistle by his ear, and it's a vibro shiv from Keats, and he pulls Trevor out, and he for some reason I keep getting Ferris and Trevor confused, which I really shouldn't for some reason, but for some reason do. And the creature lets go, and Keats explains it's the Jura Crete slug, and it looks about 10 meters long, And then Ferris ran over asking what happened, and Trevor just says, "Nothing much, I was almost strangled by an enormous slug. Nothing for you to worry about." And he didn't quite know why, and Trevor didn't quite know why he was so irritated about Ferris not saving him, and how he hadn't heard him. And Ferris just goes, "Hey, sorry," and he says thanks to Keats, and he just says, "Sure, you owe me a vibro sheath." And Ferris says that they found a place that may prove useful for information, and it's called the Underworld, and it's called Underworld Inn. And they go in, and as they're about to go in, Raya says, "Not your most premier establishment." And Ferris goes, "We do need a bed for the night." And Keats goes, "And where there's beds, there's grog, and where there's grog, there's gossip." And Ferris says to give it a try, but they should keep their weapons close in case. And so they go in, they open the stone door, and it's a massive stone room with circular stone room, and it echoes, and it's surrounded by, and it's circled by arches, and there's kind of alien gargoyles looking down at them, and there's a clerk in the middle sitting at a desk, and that's dwarfed by the room, and he's asleep, and Ferris clears his throat, he doesn't wake up, and I think it's Orion. Orion, he just slams down his blaster on the desk, and the clerk wakes up and goes, "Fire!" And Ferris just goes, No fire." Just goes, "No fire, just customers." And the clerk is, "Oh." And he says that they don't have many rooms available. They're gonna have to share. And Ferris just goes, "Fine." He also explains that they have to pay more if they want towels and water. And Ferris just goes, "Extra for water?" And the clerk just tells him that water's hard to find down here. And he just goes, all right, Ferris says that. He goes to take out his false ID docs, and the clerk just goes, "No, you don't need ID docs, just credits." Ferris goes, "But Ferris just says, "I thought it was the law." And the clerk just explains that down here there are no laws, and if he doesn't know that, he feels sorry for him. And that's when Hume, the former officer, asks if they've got some dry throats, and if he has any recommendations, and the clerk directs them off to a canteen that is surprisingly full. And they start to get stared at, but Keats says that this reminds him of a place he used to go to in Galactic City called The Door, but it's only worse. And we learn that Ferris had been there with Siri, and he had tried very hard not to be intimidated by the atmosphere of The Door, and that the dregs of the galaxy used to go there to drink, or to get information, whether it was buying or selling it, or hire bounty hunters. And it once been called the Splendor, but once the laser lights the laser lights just shorted out, and the only letters remaining was, I guess, door, and people just called it The Door. And Hume says that they should probably have a seat, and that they're attracting too much attention, and Orion says it's not too much of a bad thing, they may get some answers. And so they order some drinks and food, and everyone starts having a conversation with pretty much almost everyone, but they don't get any new information about Solace. They pretty much all they learn is that most of them know about Solace, but all of them know about Solace, but no one really knows how to find Solace. And that's once everyone's cleared out, they go back to their room, and we get a moment with Ferris. We learn that sleep couches are just planks, beds with, I think it's just planks and wood, isn't it? He just says they're planks with blankets on top, and Ferris thinks that they're not the most comfortable, but it's definitely in his top 10 foreign beds that he sleeps in, which, you know, that's quite a marvel. And he looks at Trevor, and he just feels bad, because he did hear Trevor's cry for help, but he couldn't get there in time before Keats saved him, and he felt really bad about it. And that he had been trying to protect him, but he knew he couldn't be there every time for him. And that's at least what he tried to tell himself. And he didn't quite know where his responsibility began and ended for Trevor, because he knew that Trevor could hardly handle himself as much as Trevor said he could. And although Trevor has lived on his own for years, he did occasionally need guidance and someone to look for him, and he wonders, is that his job? And he thinks if he was still a Jedi now, and if the galaxy hasn't changed, he'd be old enough to have a Padawan now. But he just didn't have that connection with Trevor that he had with Siri. He just didn't know Trevor well enough. He just lost track of him occasionally, and he just couldn't tell what he was thinking or feeling. And he just didn't have the connection with him that a Master Jedi would, and that he didn't have the link that with Trevor like he had with Siri, and that he thought it was better if they part, and that he could find him a place and try to find Trevor a haven where he can grow up safe and secure and maybe even be loved. But because Ferris would just keep burying them into more complications and danger, and it wasn't fair to Trevor. And, you know, today had been a 10-foot Duracrete slug that had almost killed Trevor, and he wonders what tomorrow or the day after could bring. And with those worrying thoughts, he was felt himself starting to slowly drift off to sleep. And he saw the others, and the soft breathing of the others told him they had gone to sleep as well. And he's about to go to sleep, and then he hears a noise, and he reaches for his lightsaber, and then sees it's Trevor, and he's walking over, trying to be quiet, to not waken the others. And I'll just read this last bit. Suddenly he heard a noise. Ferris put his hand on his lightsaber, but soon saw it was Trevor, crawling towards him, quietly, so as not to awaken the others. He stopped by the head of the sleep couch, his eyes gleaming. "I know where to find solace," he said. So Trevor knows how to find solace. So I'm going to find that interesting. I think this is definitely a chapter I have a little bit more to talk about than last chapter. First off, I am enjoying Keats, really. I think Keats is one of those characters that he's a little funny. He's funny and a bit of a know-it-all. And also, he's that kind of know-it-all character that's also a slightly little bit on the edge. He's slightly a bit edgy. He's and you can very much kind of tell that he's kind of a guy that has that really kind of high voice, a guy like that, near a very growly high voice, kind of like it's doing an elderly impression. You know, that's the kind of voice that really kind of suits his character and how he's described. You know, he's just wearing a big coat that reaches down to his ankles. And he also calls her the Sweet Blossom. He refers to Raya as Sweet Blossom. And I'm really enjoying Keats. I think he's my favourite of the arrays so far. So yeah. For Trevor, I think he was a very good point of view character for this, and I think the thing is with Trevor, I think The Last of the Jedi series has done a very good job with choosing its main characters, because you have Ferris, who is, of course, the more parental figure for Trevor. He's not a parent, but you know, he's the more parental figure for Trevor. He's meant to be looking after Trevor. And so, when we need... But also Trevor is that more naive character, and the character who's more unfamiliar with the galaxy. Ferris is more familiar with the galaxy, is more aware of the dangers. Trevor isn't as aware. And so we get to kind of really see things from his perspective of just how much awe there is in things. And I think that was something the last chapter of Dark Warning did very well. And I think it was done again very well here, when he's looking up at the city, and he's just thinking, oh, this is oppressive. It's just a lot to take this in, and you really do feel that. And I think it's a very good choice of dual protagonists for The Last of the Jedi, because you've got the kid who isn't as quite experienced, which gives those moments of awe when you need it, but you've also got Ferris, who is the more experienced character, and is able to give that bit of extra punch when you need it. And I think they are a very good combination of dual protagonists, because they fit in the two areas you need. I also think that I'm going to be interested to see just how Trevor and Ferris's relationship will develop, because Trevor didn't think Ferris heard him when he cried out for help, but Ferris did hear him, he just couldn't get there in time. And we see how he's irritated by the fact Ferris wasn't the one to save him, and how Ferris is upset that he wasn't the one to save him, and that Keats beat him to it. And I think that's going to be an interesting piece of maybe conflict that we see develop. I'm going to be interested to see how that affects their connection. I think that's going to be an interesting piece. And also, I'm going to be interested to see how Ferris figured out how to find solace. In Dark... I think it's in Dark Warning, or maybe it was earlier in this book, I said that there was a line in there that made it seem like Trevor was like the leader of the underworld in the of the criminal scene in the galaxy, and maybe this is a fan theory come true. No, I don't think that's the case. But it would be funny if that's how Trevor knows where to find solace. You know, that it would be funny if that's how. But yeah, I'm going to be interested to see just how Trevor knows. But yeah, that's my review of chapter 10. I think it is 10 of The Last of the Jedi Underworld. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Okay, I just remembered what I was forgetting from chapter 9. We learn that the book takes place a few days after Dark Warning, because Ferris says to Dexter that they left Obi-Wan behind. That they left Obi-Wan a few days ago. So it literally just came back to me while I was in the middle of doing something, and so I had to finish that up first and just had to repeat a few days. So yeah, sorry about this. But yeah, that's what I was meaning to say, in my chapter 10 review that I said I forgot about. So yeah. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and goodbye.